Welcome to our Mintcast podcast, where we interview dissenting voices the establishment would rather silence and experts who can help us go behind the headlines to break through the fog of war. I'm Mnar Adley for MintPress News. And today we're joined by Setareh Sadeghi. She's an assistant professor at the University of Tehran's Faculty of World Studies, where she focuses on American studies. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mnar.
Well, we're honored to have you here. It's important that we get an Iranian perspective to help us break through the fog of war, because right now, in their failed attempts to destroy Iranian civilization, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, and the entire war hawk administration have humiliated themselves, constantly backing down, causing a looming global economic meltdown and making the U.S. the butt of jokes worldwide. Yet they say a wounded tiger is the most dangerous, and war planners in Washington and Israel are still dreaming of expanding the U.S. and Israeli power machine over Tehran. And in their way, however, is an emboldened nation of 93 million people with a singular mission. Each day, millions of Iranians march across the country to reaffirm their support to their homeland against the Epstein class, who claim they want to liberate Iranian women and the society as a whole. And what better way to do that than bomb Iran's top universities, including Shahid Beheshti University, Sharif University of Technology, and Imam Hussein University, among many. And on top of that, they're systematically targeting hospitals. The United States and Israel have already destroyed over 307 medical facilities in just 1 month. You heard that right. Over 307 medical facilities. The carefully planned destruction of the Islamic Republic's medical infrastructure fits into a long history of deliberate U.S. and Israeli attacks on hospitals and medical research facilities. As we know, Israel destroyed nearly every hospital and medical facility in Gaza, assassinating healthcare workers during the genocide. And since the end of World War II, Washington has targeted medical centers in at least 16 countries. And the 307 Iranian sites hit does not even come close to the record for the number of hospitals in any country destroyed by American bombs and missiles. So we're going to watch a short clip of an Iranian nurse trying to save newborn babies as the hospital is being attacked. Apparently, this is what liberation looks like, according to the Epstein class. Now, Setareh, you've been on the streets marching alongside millions of men and women in your country. How do Iranians view this aggression against them, this targeting of medical research facilities that Iran is very famous for, and targeting the hospitals, the bridges, the roads, the schools, the universities? How do you think this war has also united the people, and what's your reaction to this aggression against Iran?
I mean, when the attacks are on civilian infrastructures and hospitals and schools, when the attack actually started by a double tap missile attack on a school where 170 school garrison boys were killed, then there is no room left for any doubt that the United States and the Zionist regime want to actually, liberate Iranian people or not. I mean, the Iranian people, the public sees that as an attack on their civilization, on Iran as a country, not on only the Islamic Republic as a political system. So you see even people, for example, who took part in the protests that happened in January are now shifting towards defending their country against this aggression. And because they understand that if you are killing scientists, if you are attacking hospitals, if you are attacking schools when they are in session, it means that your animosity, your hostility is towards a nation, the people, and their civilization, and centuries of history. Iran is a very old civilization with a very rich history. The historical monuments have also come under attack. Several, for example, UNESCO World Heritage Sites have come under attack by the Zionist regime and the Epstein class. I'm seeing placards, people holding and saying that our war is not, it's not a war between only Iran and the US or the Zionist regime. It's a war against Zionism. It's a war against an Epstein class. And it's amazing how the ordinary people on the streets have that understanding of how the politics of the capitalist and imperialist system have been working. Just last night, I saw people holding banners and placards that were referring to Christian Zionism, referring to Epstein class, and I'm really amazed by how people keep informed about what exactly is happening, and they see our battle as a broader battle against a class of, Satanism, basically. And when you get engaged in talks with, men and women on the streets who are marching against this aggression, you hear them talk about the Epstein files, about Zionism, about the crimes that both Netanyahu and Trump have committed. And so there is an increasing understanding and awareness of who and what exactly the Iranian nation is fighting against. So, as I said, they are seeing this as a broader battle for humanity, for and wanting to be on the right side of history, fighting against what represents or manifests Satanism and evilness, what represents, an attack against humanity, basically. It's not only about Iran, it's that we have two criminal regimes, terrorist regimes that have been acting against humanity, not only in Iran, but also in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Syria, but also across the world with absolute impunity. And Iranians are taking pride in being the first nation or the first, political establishment, let's say, to have the courage and the power to stand against the aggressors, these aggressors, and to bring about some sort of punishment to what for the crimes that they have committed.
And Iran has accused the United States of its intent to commit genocide in Iran. The Trump administration has made it very clear that has been their intent, with Trump himself tweeting that he's going to wipe out the entire civilization of Iran. And as we just, explained, hospitals, schools, UNESCO heritage sites are being targeted. Children are being targeted. Women are being targeted. Newborn babies are being targeted. And the BBC and other Western corporate media outlets have the audacity to promote, pro-regime change, opposition activists on their websites. People that are calling for Iran to be nuked to death. It's unbelievable. I want to show this article by the BBC. It's by a contributor who is apparently a senior reporter at the BBC News Persian. Her name is Gonche. I'm probably butchering her name here, but it's Gonche Habib Lazad. And she was actually exposed by ex-users in the Gray Zone and other people online as being paid for by this NED regime change CIA-backed network that is funded by the CIA to promote regime change. And the BBC is happily just publishing this article where she says, if attacking targets in the country brings down the Islamic Republic, I'm fine with that. That's what she said. And she said about them hitting energy infrastructure using an atomic bomb or leveling Iran, my honest reaction to that is I am okay with all of these. So Satareh, what is your reaction to this kind of propaganda?
I mean, unfortunately, a part of the Iranian diaspora has served as native informants, legitimizing attacks on Iranian people. I'm not sure if Qonche has any relatives or families left in Iran, or if she does, she actually cares that during those attacks that are supposed to finally bring about the collapse of the current establishment. I mean, people are being killed during these attacks. In order to, for example, take out one leader, they are killing hundreds of people. There is no precision attacks as they claim to be. And it's very clear that they are doing everything in order to maximize civilian casualty, in order to create shock and desperation within the population, wishfully thinking that would turn the population against the Islamic Republic and wanting them to, overthrow the only establishment that is actually protecting their lives during this war, to bring down this political establishment. But people's understanding is that despite the grievances that we might have, just like any other countries and with any other political systems, we understand that it is the Islamic Republic that is protecting the sovereignty of Iran and protecting its borders. People are really disgusted by how some of these, part of this Iranian diaspora abroad, have been normalizing attacks on civilians, attacks on civilian infrastructure. For them, it's okay to massacre Iranians if that leads to the political agenda or the success of the political agenda that I have been pursuing. And as you also mentioned, many of these people are on a payroll by the UK regime, by the US regime, and they have been pretending that they are representing the Iranian nation, when in fact they are just representing their own political agenda, and they're not talking on behalf of Iranians inside Iran. People like Qonche or people like Masih Ali-Nejad, who have previously been proven to be paid by for example, the US regime or the UK regime, are disgusted inside the country because they have been sitting in their safe houses and mansions and earning money, and they have been normalizing the massacre of ordinary people on the streets of Iran, and this is not acceptable. I mean, even for people who have partially maybe internalized the anti-Iran propaganda coming from these outlets that these people are working for, understand that bombing a nation does not liberate them. And they're never talking about, for example, okay, what is going to replace the Islamic Republic? They're just thinking about finishing a political system that they don't like, even though polls show that it still enjoys a significant amount of popular support, because they want to, get paid. They want to get their agenda go forward. But for Iranians, it has become clear. I've talked to the newer generation, the younger generations. As I said, some of them had even taken part in the previous protest against the government or against, economic situations or other civil grievances that they have had. And they are saying that we totally understand that the nature of the US regime as an imperialist power and the Zionist regime as an occupying power has always been to kill and massacre people. They understand that, for example, when Trump puts out statements where he calls for the annihilation of an entire nation or entire civilization, then it's not about a political, or a regime change in Iran. It's about the total destruction of a country as a nation. Even Trump has said that we will strike them so hard that it will become impossible for them to rebuild as a nation. So they the agenda is very clear. And this is the same playbook that people in the region have watched unfold in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and Libya, leading to decades of instability, destruction, and basically chaos for the indigenous people of the country. But for Iran, people are taking pride in how their country has been able to, despite massive losses, still continue to exist, to to resist the imperialist aggression, and that's how it's perceived here. We know that this is an imperialist aggression against them that wants to destroy us as a nation, and we're not going to give in. And one of the very popular slogans these nights during the rallies across the country is that we don't want to negotiate, we don't want to compromise, and we want to continue fighting. I even see, people holding up notes that says that all nations are afraid of war, but we are afraid of negotiations, because we engaged in negotiations and we saw how the other party does not even consider us an equal partner and wants to attack us during the negotiations. One of the fears that people express these days is that we know that it's very likely for the United States and the Zionist regime to target and attack us again during the negotiations, because that's exactly what happened previously in the so-called negotiations with the United States.
Of course, I don't think any country looking at what's happening with Iran trusts the United States, whether it's even Europe or the global south. The entirety of the world sees the United States as a pathological liar and manipulative and psychopathic in its ways in dealing with diplomacy. I mean, this is what diplomacy looks like. This is Uncle Sam's version of liberation and diplomacy and democracy. I mean, this is horrific. But of course, like you said, this is the playbook. I mean, the United States did commit these war crimes and massacres, whether it was in Iraq or Afghanistan or in other countries in the global south. I mean, Trump just kidnapped Nicolas Maduro a month before he invaded or tried to invade Iran. And so we're just continuing this forever war machine. And the United States backed Israel in its genocide in Gaza. But you know what's really interesting about the war against Iran is that despite how much propaganda is being published in places like the BBC or in the New York Times, to paint the Iranian people and their government and their pushback and their response to U.S. and Israeli aggression as terrorism, we've been seeing a lot of these pages kind of pop up on social media, whether it's the Lego videos that are coming up that are pushing back against the propaganda machine to give the Iranian perspective, like explosive media. And we saw how YouTube just actually banned their page. They took them down, they deleted them, and they banned their page, and they accused explosive media of being tied to the IRGC and to directly to the Iranian government. But actually, it's just a group of like regular Iranians that are independent, creative AI creators who came up with this idea. And they got banned because they have been so successful in pushing back against the propaganda machine. And they're showing this, their narrative is coming through Lego imagery. And so people are watching these videos. They have millions upon millions of views, if not billions of views. And the videos that are coming out of like the White House, people are shitting on those, whereas they want to watch the Lego movies, the Lego videos. And then we also have pages like from independent journalists and people like yourself also who are doing street interviews. One of the pages that I've been following is Shamaghdari. What's really great about this page is that you see Iranian women on the streets. I mean, I think his goal is to show like the women here are not oppressed. They're smart, they have PhDs, they're highly educated, highly spoken. And even if they disagree with the government, which is like normal, like every country has people and citizens who disagree with their government, they're going to stand and support the homeland. And in fact, a lot of these people, whether the women wear hijab or not, they still supported Sayyid Ali Khamenei. and they viewed him as like the leader, their spiritual leader, whether they wore hijab or not. And he just breaks through that propaganda that showed that the media, Western media, shows us that Iranian women are oppressed and they want to get rid of Sayyid Ali Khamenei, and all of those things. And so, what has your experience been on the streets? Because right now, every single day, we're watching these videos of like millions of Iranians on the streets, pledging their allegiance to their country. And like you said, they're supporting their government, they're supporting their military, and they're opposed to this sort of aggression. So what are you hearing on the streets, and what can you tell us about the women maybe that are on the streets of Iran right now?
Well, in the majority of the rallies and gatherings that I've been to, it's very clearly the majority of the people attending the rallies are women. So women have a more significant or more visible presence. And I've seen women waving like really heavy flags, chanting nonstop, and leading chants like other people, echoing and chanting behind them. And I've seen them organizing, chants or different forms of gatherings within these rallies, or even activities for children. So, to keep them busy and interested. I've seen women with strollers, with their babies in the strollers, and women of different ages with different way of, practicing Islam or practicing their hijab or their cultural, costumes. And there are also, like, for example, sometimes at these rallies, the main leader of the chants will ask men to repeat part of the chant or part of the slogan, and women the next part. And usually women are louder and more vocal. And that's one of the jokes, for example, that the organizers have, that look, women are louder than you, women are stronger, they have a stronger presence here, and you have to try to catch up with what they're doing. So and as you said, also these interviews that we're seeing, we see a lot of women. There was an only women rally yes, or maybe 2 days ago in Iran, because it was ahead of celebrating Girls' Day in Iran. So they organized an all-women rally across the country, and you see images of women taking up arms or driving their, military vehicles or riding their motorcycles, and all ready to defend their countries, and with many different, with a variety of styles of dressing and just appearance. And I think it's what we are seeing, or has been unfolding, especially during this war, is that this dichotomy that they had tried to create, that there is like a hardliner conservative a part of the society in Iran that supports the government, and they are all very conservative, and even in the way that they appear and they're wearing of hijab, and there's a non-conservative, liberal part of the society that is totally against establishment. That dichotomy is collapsing. In general, the narrative that has been built up during these more than 40, almost 50 decades against Iranian, and trying to paint Iranian women as, with a very Orientalist brush, showing Iranian women, for example, in chador and hijab as being very oppressed. And suddenly the world is seeing that there are all these Iranian women in chador, in hijab, and they're, as you mentioned, there are doctors, they're engineers, they're very vocal, they're organizers, they're activists. And they are supporting their government. Some are not. Some of the religious ones are also, they have grievances against certain policies of the government. And on the other hand, you have a part of the society where women who may not look conservative at all, but still they are very supportive of their country, because nationalism and patriotism in Iran is very strong. It's people try, or the education system and what we have seen and we have lived through has made us develop this, nationalistic part of our identity. So our identity is shaped around different values, but one of the main ones is being very patriotic and being loving our country. All these songs that we have heard in support of the country, or nationalist and patriotic songs that we have grown up with, the education system where we were educated, where women had a stronger presence. More than 70% or around 70% of Iranian university students are women. And these are the same women that are behind organizing many of these activities and raising and educating their children and other generations to be very nationalistic and being patriotic. And we are seeing the collapse of the decades of propaganda against Iran and creating this dichotomy, not only through the street videos, but also, as you mentioned, these Lego videos and this independent media production and content creation online that is fighting effectively against the corporate media's depiction of Orientalist and imperialist depiction of Iran. We're seeing Generation Z of Iran using AI, using technology to show what they really are and taking back their agency and beginning to narrate what they are, and not allowing the imperialist media to take over the narrative and describe them instead of them saying who exactly they are. I saw this headline by The Economist where it was a desperate attempt to say we're very impressed by these videos, but using the same Orientalist tropes against Iran. This joyless theocracy is finally managing to win the propaganda war. So Iran is not winning only on the battlefields. Iran is also winning online. You're seeing Iranian diplomats, official embassy accounts, and these Legos and videos going viral around the world. And many people are for the first time realizing that, oh, women go to university in Iran. Oh, women are, free in Iran. They didn't need us to liberate them. You have women as ministers, as deputy ministers, doctors, and engineers, teachers, artists. And this is the image that did not exist there because the imperialist narrative, the way they wanted to frame Iranian women as oppressed. And all of a sudden, the world is realizing that there is diversity in Iran. There is a plus 90 million nation that cannot be painted with the same brush. There is diversity of ethnicities, of religious practices, of languages even, and cultural values and cultural practices. And for the first time, the world is able to see through it despite the manipulation of algorithms, despite controlling and trying to eliminate Iranian voices. People, for example, like Arya, who has a very significant following on Twitter, his account was suspended, and he was not even given an explanation why. And you can see that this is because they want to suppress Iranian voices. But despite all these attempts, real images of Iran are being produced and being circulated, and that imperialist narrative of Iran is beginning to shatter.
And one of the rising stars of the propaganda war is Ibrahim Zulfiqari. There have been so many memes that have been made about him. Even the women here are like crushing over Ibrahim Zulfiqari because of his outspoken stance against the U.S. and Israeli aggression. And so Israel right now has accused Ibrahim Zulfiqari of being AI. What is your response to that?
Well, they have also said that people on the streets are AI. I mean, this is their, it's one of their earlier stages of their grieving that they have lost this war. It's denial. So you start by denying that you have lost it. And one of their ways of denying is, saying that, oh, these images of people supporting the government is AI, or this military spokesperson is AI. When in fact it's a real person, and people were impressed by not only his being outspoken against Zionist and imperialist aggression, but also having a PhD and speaking several languages, and so this is very different from what we're seeing from the U.S. regime and the people in the U.S. regime. The average education that they have received, their qualifications, their background are far different from the Iranian diplomats, military personnel, and spokesperson. Most of the Iranian officials you're seeing, they have PhDs, they speak at least 2 different languages, and that's the first response that people like Trump or other people in the U.S. regime have, to deny their existence. But there will be a time when, they know that they are real. It's just their way of manipulating the public opinion inside the United States. But the world has learned that Trump and the U.S. government in general are pathological liars. Trump, ever since the war has started, has published several statements that were proven false within a few hours, and that continues to be the case. Even the market has started not really reacting to his statements and more reacting to the realities on the grounds, because they have learned that this is the way he tries to manipulate the market, and it's usually not true. Within a few hours, he's proven wrong. He has been saying that just a few hours ago, he said that he is having very good conversations with Iran, and the conversations are going on very well. The next line, he says that we have destroyed their navy. They don't have a navy. They don't have leaders. They don't have, army or forces. And then the question is, then who are you talking to? If there are no leaders left, then who are you having good conversations with? So, it's very clear that Trump is a liar, and whatever he puts out cannot be trusted.
The Iran war has been described as the biggest opportunity, quotes, that's in quotes, at U.S. oil lobby's D.C. summit this past February. So we went from, we want to liberate Iranian women, to we want your oil. And of course, because the Strait of Hormuz was closed by Iran, and Trump just could not handle that sort of defeat, he went and closed it himself, like double closing it and sanctioning it to not allow any ships pass through. What do you make of these actions by Trump and this targeting of Iran's oil?
Well, he imposed a blockade on a blockade, and yet sanctioned ships pass through it. So we don't know what exactly practically is happening there. But it shows Trump's and the U.S. regime's desperation to find an off-ramp. And still, the biggest mistake that the U.S. regime is still making, and they continue to make the same mistake, especially towards Iran, is that they think they can bring Iran to the negotiation table at gunpoint. It's not going. Iran has made it clear this is not going to work. If you continue using a coercive language, threatening us to get on the table with you, this is not going to work. We will talk to you only if you acknowledge our sovereignty, acknowledge us as an equal partner, and then maybe there is a chance that we can talk. And even though we're very pessimistic, we do not trust you. But Trump is ruining his every possible chance of, convincing Iran that he actually does want to talk. And he's using coercive measures whenever he can, mostly rhetorical, but sometimes also in action, in order to, save face and kind of cover up his defeats in this war. As you said, he started by saying that he wants to do regime change. Then he said that regime change was not even an objective. And now he says that the regime has already been changed, but even the last name of our supreme or of our the leader of the revolution has not changed. So we have the same president, we have the same government, and somehow he thinks that he has already achieved regime change inside Iran. But for a declining imperialist power, I think the U.S. has become this fascist regime that tries to clinch to, all sorts of aggression to save itself from total collapse. Iran exercising its leverage over the Strait of Hormuz is a big threat to the capitalist system, but also to petrodollar. And maybe Trump doesn't understand that, but people around him understand that this could change the global economic buildup. The United States' control over the West Asian region is mainly through the petrodollar. The United States has been forcing nations to trade oil only in dollar. And this is for the first time that, there is a very substantial threat to petrodollar. And we have seen, for example, how the nationalization of Suez Canal by Nasser in Egypt led to the collapse of the British imperialist power. And this is a very possible scenario that could happen with Iran. If the petrodollar is attacked and the dominance of dollar over the global energy markets is diminished, then the United States will have no power over the region, or almost no power over the region. And the United States does not want to lose that. The United States will do everything it can to maintain the dominance of dollar in the region. Whether or not these aggressions and these coercive rhetorical statements will work, that's a different question. I don't think it's going to work, because Iran has made it clear the more you use coercive rhetoric, the more you try to attack us and threaten us, the more willing we will be to protect our sovereignty and to use our cards to push back your attempts. Iran has already created this somehow a new system in the Strait of Hormuz, and ships are required to pass through.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Are you referring to the toll booths that have been set up where Iran is charging in the Chinese yuan, and they are allowing ships that they approve of to pass through as long as they pay in the Chinese yuan?
Yes, that's one thing, but it's also Iran's oil being sold in a currency different than dollar, because this is the beginning of a collapse of the sanctioned regime on Iran for decades. Iran has been selling more oil for a higher price during this war than ever before. The sanctions have not officially been lifted on Iran, but because Iran gained control over the Strait of Hormuz, it has been able to somehow reverse the sanctions on the country and on its economy. The U.S. aggression didn't start in February. The U.S. aggression against the country has started ever since the Islamic Republic of Iran was established as an independent power against imperialist power in this region. And they have been trying to use sanctions to choke our economy, to cripple our economy, and to manufacture consent within the country, so to justify this invasion that we're seeing. And so Iran is somehow reversing that by regulating the passage through the Strait of Hormuz. So now ships have to coordinate with Iranian forces to do that. And Iran has rerouted the passage, so it's closer to its coastal lines and territorial water. And by the way, because there are people who might say that this is against international law, but first of all, Iran is not a full party to UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And second of all, based on the 1958 Geneva Convention, like countries are allowed to regulate coastal, passages for their own security. And because Iran is under attack, it is allowed, even based on international law, because it is actually there. I mean, the strait was an international passage, but the water is Iranian water, and Iran is allowed, even based on international law, to protect its sovereignty and regulate, especially during the war. And that's effectively putting dollar and the dominance of dollar in danger. We have seen non-alignment movements and organizations like BRICS trying to reverse the dominance of dollar, but because of the infiltration within BRICS, but also because, this is a very gradual process to totally ditch dollar, but Iran is accelerating that. And international commentators are already talking about a global shift that has been made, and Iran becoming a fourth center of power in the world. And one of the main reasons is Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, because as we know, more than 20% of global energy passes through that, and a significant part of, for example, fertilizers, pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and the consequent disruption on the global food supply will have a great impact that the world has yet to see. I mean, these are things that we are going to see the impact within the next few weeks or few months. And once that happens, the world will have to acknowledge and accept Iran's new inspection, let's say, or regulation regime over the Strait of Hormuz. And that will definitely at some point lead to the collapse of dollar.
This is a really incredible phenomenon that's taking place that really is shifting power towards Iran, ironically, in the middle of this war. While the United States and Israel are, they've had some support maybe from the UK with this war against Iran, some help from, Gulf Arab nations like the UAE, but not really from many of the European countries. Meanwhile, Iran is getting help from a major superpower, which is China. Another superpower is Russia. And, Iran is finding itself finding more help from a number of places that the United States is not. And so in what ways have Russia and China helped Iran over the last few weeks and years, perhaps, that have allowed it to succeed in pushing back against this U.S. and Israeli aggression?
Well, I think for both Russia and China, joining Iran to sort of combat the unipolar world system that has allowed the U.S. and its so-called allies to plunder nations, to plunder natural resources of other countries, to impose a bullying system that coerces other nations into surrendering to the imperialist ambitions of the U.S. regime. And that's what Iran and China share. So China and Russia have the same objective as Iran, which is trying to counter these coercive influence that the U.S. has been imposing on this region, but also on a global level. For China, it's been more through economy, but for Russia, it's both about energy and also military, military performance. And both China and Russia have tried to use their, for example, vetoing power to create some balance of power against the United States within the international bodies, as well as providing military and intelligence assistance to Iran, and that has helped make it possible for Iran to effectively form some sort of alliance, especially in the Strait of Hormuz with China and with Russia, to push for this shift of global power, or shift of power inside the Persian Gulf and in the Strait of Hormuz. Even though I would say, for China and Russia, the objectives apart from that are different from what, for example, Iran has. And by that, I mean, for example, Iran has absolutely zero relationships with the Zionist regime and does not even recognize the usurping regime as a country. And I'm saying that because I know a lot of people might criticize China and Russia for having limited objection to the existence of the Zionist settler colonial project, when in fact, their ideology or their sort of foreign policy is shaped around different values. And the main thing that makes them allies of Iran is that they want to, as I said, counter this unipolar world and start moving towards a multipolar world where different actors have equal say and resist imperialist aggression against different countries. And both Russia and China also understand that the United States is trying to counter their influence and that counter their power in different parts. For China, it's always the issue of Taiwan. For Russia, it's Ukraine. And the United States regime always tries to use cards in order to somehow attack on those countries. And because we all have been victims of U.S. sanctions, U.S. aggression, we come together to help repel these imperialist aggressions against our independent nations.
And when talking about Iran, I always like to wrap it up with the betrayal of the Arab states, because it's just, when you look at the countries that have stood heroically for the cause of Palestine and for liberation in the region, it's always been countries like Iran, Yemen, and Lebanon, or South Lebanon to be specific. And when it comes to the countries that have stood hand in hand with the Zionist state of Israel and the U.S. empire, it's always been the Arab Gulf states alongside, Morocco and Egypt and Jordan. And when we look at the war against Iran right now, these Gulf states are hosting U.S. military bases that have really been targeted and attacked in so many different ways by Iran. And they've been hosting U.S. multinational corporations that have direct ties to the U.S. and Israeli tech machine that enables the forever war machine, like Amazon, for example, and banks that profit off of these wars. But one state in particular is the UAE, which, of course, on the international stage presents itself as a victim, right? As this victim who has nothing to do with this war, but in fact, they've provided radar systems for Israel and the United States to target Iran. They've allowed their bases to be used to target Iran. They've participated with Israel in false flags on Oman. And so this really is the truest form of the betrayal of the Arab states. We see it mostly with the UAE, of course others, but it's very obvious right now with the UAE. The UAE has denied its participation in the genocide in Sudan, right? They lie outright, just like the US lies, Israel lies, Trump lies. The UAE just outright lies about its participation in the genocide in Yemen. And now it's doing the same thing with the war in Iran. Can you tell us more about that?
The UAE, apart from playing victim, which is, by the way, a Zionist trend, They have also announced that they have won this war, but they, at the same time, they're saying that they were not part of this war and they didn't want to take part in it. But the UAE has been hosting U.S. military bases. It has become, a pioneer, sort of, in normalizing relations with the Zionist regime. And as you said, they have been hosting these tech companies that have been participating in the genocide in Gaza, but also against, in the propaganda machine against Iran and the actual war that we're seeing against Iran. I mean, in order to better understand what exactly UAE is doing, I think it's important to bear in mind that something around 11% of the residents of UAE are actually Emirati. So the vast majority, some like 90%, are not even Emiratis. And especially during the first weeks of the war, when U.S. assets and Zionist assets in the UAE were targeted by Iran in response to UAE's complicity in the war against Iranian nation, we saw interruption, for example, in the arms supply to the perpetrators of the genocide in Sudan. We saw some interruptions also online in the algorithm manipulations against voices, anti-Zionist voices. I mean, Suna was back and they started doing it again, but people were reporting that, for example, some accounts that they would not, anti-Zionist accounts that would not appear in their, feeds or timelines are starting to appear. And that shows how the war actually, the retaliation attacks or the self-defense attacks by Iran against U.S. assets in Iran, in UAE, started interrupting these online wars against anti-Zionism, against Zionism as well. So I think the data is there. It's, of course, UAE will deny that, but it's very clear that the UAE played a very important role in normalizing relations with the Zionist regime, and they basically turned anti-Palestinian. So not only pro-Zionist regime, but also anti-Palestinian. There were reports that people were arrested in UAE for voicing support for Palestine, or even for example, they were stopped at an airport for just basically having a Palestinian flag on their purse. And UAE has also become a hub for Zionist tourists, when at a time when the entire world was rejecting Zionism because of watching 2 years of live stream genocide in Palestine, UAE decided to stand with the Zionist regime and with the United States in their war against in their genocide against Palestinians. And as I said, I mean, UAE has been complicit. They have been partner to U.S. aggression against Iran and against, they have been also complicit against the genocide in Sudan and with the genocide that happened in Palestine. And no matter how much they try to save face, as long as they think by, becoming a slave of the United States and serving U.S. interest more than the interest of the indigenous people of this region, is not going to save them. Even when Iran started responding to the attacks that came from UAE's airspace and as well as territory, the United States did nothing to protect the UAE. And when they become too costly for the United States to maintain, they're going to be abandoned. And the imperialist power is not going to save them. I think it will take them a very long time until they really understand that the way for them to survive, being on the side of the U.S., with its war crimes against humanity, against the people in the region, is not going to save them. The same is true with other monarchy regimes in the region. Their demographics are not in their favor when people are not from that region. I mean, in Qatar also you have more Indians than Qataris. Let's also remember that Qatar, while they were preparing for the World Cup, more than 6,000 workers died during these preparations because of the horrible conditions that these workers had. And when missiles start coming their ways, just like the Zionist regime, where people are not indigenous to that land, a lot of people are going to leave. And this is how this, this big mall that has been imposing as a country is going to start collapsing and not having any validity, in the global public opinion, but also when the capitalist system comes under attack, they are going to be the first victims of that collapse.
Of course. And the majority of the people in these countries don't support their governments. They don't support these monarchies. They don't support the United States and Israel. They see the United States and Israel as the aggressors. And we're seeing it even with like that famous Kuwaiti Quran reciter, Mnar Adley. He's a very famous Kuwaiti Quran reciter, and he came out to pray. He came out to pray for the Gulf Arab leaders against Iran. And he was kind of cheering on Trump's war of aggression against Iran. And the people canceled him. The people of Kuwait canceled him. The people of these Gulf states canceled him. And so if they can cancel a famous Quran reciter, imagine what's brewing right now against their own leaders soon to come, as they see who the axis of assistance is, the axis of assistance is versus the axis of resistance, who are working truly to liberate the people of this region and to support Palestine and the Palestinians. I mean, what people witnessed in Gaza, and now we're witnessing it in Lebanon, and now we're seeing, Trump and Netanyahu attempting to commit a genocide in Iran. The people have woken up. Maybe they were on the fence before, maybe they were kind of pulled into the sectarian narratives. It was like, now that's like so clear as day what's happening, and how this web of lies has pulled people against each other. People are aware. And so I do agree that, something is going to be happening in these Gulf Arab nations very soon. The illusion is going to be shattered, that's for sure. Setareh Sadeghi, what a pleasure to have had you on today and to hear from an Iranian perspective on the ground in this war of aggression against your country. Thank you so much, and we hope to have you on again soon.
Thank you so much for having me and for this great conversation.